Okay, so treat for you guys today. Couple things. One, you don't have to listen to me all day, right? Whoop, okay. And I have some officers here to talk to you guys from varied backgrounds, so military and civilian experience. I thought it'd be useful for you guys based on what you are trying to do out there in the real world and life after school. Two of them are former cadets, so you have to guess, see which ones it is. But so brief introductions from them, and then it's your guys' class. Okay, by all means, ask them questions about things we've discussed in this class, about what you hope to do in your lives, work-life balance, family, anything like that. So by all means, ask away to anything. Sound good? Cool. All right. You're good.
Hey, Dan Uriset. Was active duty Air Force for 10 years. Spoiler alert, I was here. I was Gator 2 CO, and then did a little bit of reserves and guard, and I fly for United Airlines as well. So we'll keep it short.
I'm Joe Ranch. I was in Squadron 16. I did 8 years active duty and then switched over. B-52 guy. Now I do a plane called an RC-26.
Sweet. I'm not the guy that was here before.
That's right.
135s, C-130s, active duty first, then I did started the guard 2013. And since then I've been working with these guys doing MQ1s, MQ9s, and now rolling over to the RC-26. So I'm gonna start with that. How many of you were here? Were any of you here before last time?
My class last semester at Keeling, yeah. He's been with me forever.
2, 7, 13. Okay. I'm from Wyoming, so I counted. That's cool. All right, cool. We open for questions.
It's up to you guys.
It's all you, and if you don't start asking, we start
talking.
What you guys got?
Where are y'all from?
I'm from Minnesota. Kind of came down here on a whim. So,
I'm from Wyoming,
yeah.
originally. So.
I grew up in Richmond, Texas, down in Fort Bend County. Yep. I think Frenchie has one too. Yeah. So I'm sorry. We're all currently in the Texas Air National Guard down in Ellington Field. Everybody know where that is? Down South Houston by Hobby. So there's a lot going on there. We've got Army, National Guard, Marine Corps Reserves, Navy Reserves, Coast Guard Aviation Unit, and then our unit, our wing. So that's where we're currently serving. So we're really into our unit's steeped in the tradition. Texas Guard. It's the oldest aviation unit in the Air National Guard.
Second only in active duty also.
Yeah. So that's where the come and take it. Good catch.
Why did y'all decide to go from active duty to National Guard?
That's a good question.
Cool, I'll answer it. It's pretty easy. So for me, my wife is from Houston, Texas, and one of my buddies that I went to pilot training with, just a couple months ahead of me, called me up one day when we happened to be landing in Houston to visit family, and said that there were some jobs available and that I should apply. And my wife heard, wait, we can PCS to Houston, which was her hometown, and said, no, we can't PCS. I can separate from active duty and jump into the guard. And all she heard was, wait, we can move to Houston. So I jumped through some crazy hoops and made our way to Houston. And since then, haven't been happier. It's a great switch for us.
How many of you are on a contract? One? That's it? Two?
That's good.
Okay, how many people know the difference of those, the difference between the guard, the reserve, and the active duty? Some of these guys? Okay. Well, so the active duty component is actually a Title X force, so that's underneath the President directly and underneath the Department of Defense. And as a officer on the active duty, regardless of branch, you pretty much move every 2, 3, 4 years. Depends a little bit on your job, but it's a very kind of immersive environment, and it's, you're pretty much there primarily for about 20 years, lots of instability, fair amount of job security though. The reserve and the guard, the reserves are operated, organized roughly the same way, but you're very much part-time. Come in every weekend, 1 week a month, 2 weeks a year. There's other periods and other times you can come in and get paid, but it's kind of, the idea is you have the citizen airman, citizen marine, and you kind of blend those two. And then within those positions, even within the reserves, you do have some full-time people that work as civilians, and then also that, or people who are just, no kidding, active duty within the reserves. And the same thing is replicated on the Guard side. The difference of the Guard is you are organized through the DOD, but it goes through the adjutant and through your governor. So there's some legalities that are kind of complex into how you're able to be used and what options that you actually are able to employ against. But you actually, from a personal standpoint, you kind of trade some of that stability for some of that security for stability when you move over to a Guard or reserve unit. Because normally Guards and reserve units, you stay in one spot for a long period of time.
I was just really salty and sick of being gone all the time. I flew the C-17, and then September 11th happened, and I spent 300-ish days, 2 years in a row overseas, and I said, enough of that. And so I was sort of obligated for a period of time, and then I went to go instruct primary flight instruction for the Air Force to new pilot candidates up in Mississippi, and airlines were hiring. And I don't know what they call it now, but I was an MIS major here, and I had zero technical expertise in that, so I knew I wasn't getting a job there, in that career field. So being a pilot, if somebody's hiring for your job skills, you go take a job. So that's I considered myself to be a free agent once I was in the reserves. So that's a good question, though. So why are you guys so? Go ahead.
So, what jobs in the Air Force do you think suit liberal arts majors more, people that are
Pilot.
Yeah, that's a good question, pilots. Certain job categorizations within any of the services, they're going to recruit really heavily towards that expertise or that degree, so that you can more easily attain the expertise, and probably is requisite for certain, like engineering is a good one. And it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to know that, hey, if you're going to go to like cyber or space, they're going to really want more technical undergraduate degrees and promote, postgraduate education in those same fields. But there's, a whole lot of jobs within the DoD or the military. They'll just train you for them, and pilot's a good example. Infantry, that kind of stuff. Consequently, a lot of those jobs don't have a lot of transferable skills to the corporate world. So one of the challenges as a pilot, if you don't want to fly airplanes for a living after the military, you better go figure out how to do something else as a side hustle, get degrees, get experience in other ways. And the same thing would apply for some, what they call MOSs in the Army, that you can imagine, like artillery and infantry. You're not going to go blow stuff up at KPMG. So you better be able to have some marketable skills. So that's a challenge for the active duty folks. And you can imagine doing 20 years, now you're like 42, 43. Your peers in the workforce have 20 years of experience, and you're trying to come in there with no experience. And so that's a real challenge for a lot of career military folks. And they're all smart and talented, and they figure a path out, but it takes a lot of intentional effort to figure that out. Go ahead.
So what does your general day look like? Because you hear the word, officer or guard thrown around a lot, but what does that entail for you on day to day?
Go ahead.
So, I live about an hour away from where I work. So I generally wake up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock. PT is a big thing for me. So first thing I do every morning is try and get in at least an hour and a half of PT. Luckily, I've got a boss who's pretty big on PT also, so it's not too bad. We're pretty, I don't want to say we're liberal with it, but it's one of those things that we take seriously. And in the Guard, if as you can imagine, there are plenty of ways, especially as a part-time, where that can kind of run away from you. But after PT, you get showered up. For me, so right now, Deputy Operations Group Commander. Most of my day is filled up with primarily meetings, unfortunately, lots of meetings. I'm getting ready to go fly the RC-26, so I get throw in some study time for there to get ready to go do that. And then previous to that was flying MQ-1, so the unmanned aircraft. So on days that you fly with that, usually as call it a staffer, you try and get over there once or twice a week for a couple hours each day that you fly. And then amongst all that, you're doing whatever studying you have to do, studying up on what it is that we're going to do for future missions, how we're going to take care of our people, helping out, in my case, helping out squadron commanders who are obviously helping out every member in their squadron to continually develop. That's about it. I usually roll out of there later on in the day. Audio book both ways. That's what I got.
Yeah, it's like any other, career field. So you start out, say you get out of here and you get your double E or whatever you're doing, you go to work for like company X, and you're sort of a worker bee, right? So you build up your technical expertise, your experience, and they hire from similar companies to come in, and then you have increasing levels of responsibility throughout the company up, through the being VP of X or Y and Z. And I saw it firsthand with my wife, who also went here, and she was in business management, wound up going into purchasing and on the supply chain side, and and I saw the whole development as a junior VP and all this kind of stuff. And got her MBA, and it's the same thing in the military. So as a pilot or a nav or whatever, that's what you do, and then you they lump on all this other crap onto your back that you get to do in your spare time. We all just want to go fly. That's all we want to do. Unfortunately, you have to be commanders and ops officers, and you have to do all these jobs that are administrative, to where you have to, it's for us, by us kind of thing. And it becomes difficult. And you guys are really busy. You all are really busy. And I remember being really busy in the Corps. The good news is that doesn't stop, right? So you're never going to not be busy. And the only people that do things that are busy are people that don't have time to do them. It's just the nature of what makes you do this. It's indicative to the kind of people that are attracted to busy things. And he's right, and I'm the same way. I get up about 4 a.m. and I do, triathlon or whatever, so I'll get in the water at 5 and, knock out in, 90 minutes swim and then go to work and do all this stuff. And like I said, I fly for United as well. Yesterday I was flying for them, and as a commander on the military side, even if I'm not in uniform, I'm still the commander, and I have great people that do the job when I'm not there. But there's some things you just have to weigh in on. So life is crazy, and the good news is that it's kind of a big boy program, like we say. So it's the less micromanaged as an organization is, the happier people usually are, and that kind of just comes with productivity. And that may be, I don't know how easy that is to see at this point, because you all live fairly regimented lives. But if you want to get it to work at 9, you get to work at 9, and that either does or does not have consequences, and then you will pay them if there are consequences, and that just depends on the particular situation where you work. You know what I'm saying? And there's units on base where they're real hardcore about, you'll show up at 6:15 and you'll leave at 4, and that's cool, But I don't know if they're any more productive than our organization. So it just kind of depends. That's the best answer. It depends.
That's their favorite answer.
Yeah, it's a super crappy answer. It depends.
What else?
I'll say for the guys who are in the Corps, what was the most valuable thing that you learned that you brought into your professional lives or your military lives afterwards?
I have one that I use in like interviews and stuff, to be honest. But so when I was a junior, I was on the wing staff. We only had one wing, with one wing, 2 groups, and 8 squadrons. and there were just 4 major units. It was very neat and, you know, compartmentalized. It's really, I can't understand the way you guys organize now. But, so it was very whatever. And so like the deal is when I was here, it's like, oh, you're a staff guy, you're a sellout, you're out of unit, blah, 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 whatever. It's probably the same way. That's cool. I had like 36 fish buddies. We weren't all staying in the unit, right? So we had a bunch of smart, talented folks. We had folks on core staff, wing staff, group staff. We eventually had the deputy corps commander, the wing commander, I don't know if it's the vice wing commander, the group commander. I mean, we had like the whole, like we just basically ruled the whole corps on the air side. My class did in Gator 2. And then we won GM my senior year. We had a really dysfunctional situation, and so I came back to be the squadron commander, and which was like it's a one-way street. Like once you go to sea, you can't come back and then be the squadron commander because you sold out your junior year or whatever. But I did. I interviewed for it because I felt that and he's a good friend of mine still, but the guy that was first sergeant was going to be terrible at the job, and he wasn't the best person at the job. So I applied for the job and I got it. So here's the deal. What I learned was I was in this situation, and you know how it is with your buddies. You're all buddies and everything, but here I was coming back, and so they didn't like that. That I was going to come back to tell them what to do and all this kind of stuff. So the challenge from my perspective was I had to get these folks, these other, at the time 28 or 25 people, whatever it was, still in the unit, to agree to let me lead them, right? Because we're buddies, and like Diamond, Moons, whatever, it doesn't matter. They just tell you, go to hell, at some point. And you don't, right? Somebody said they were on marching tours today or something, or whatever you have today. That's not a very big stick that you have as a commander. Like if that's all you got, like I have legal authority to like send people to jail and stuff as a commander, and your commanders here don't really have a lot of authority to. Your best interest is to get folks to want to do what you're saying is important, and that was a real challenge for me, and it all worked out because I was able to recruit some of my buddies that were on the core staff and whatever to come back to the unit and to be training officers and flight officers and these really critical positions that they didn't get to wear diamonds and all this stuff, but they didn't care. And so we all sort of picked up an oar and paddled in the same direction. And I'm a 97 guy, and everybody thinks that their previous year was totally terrible. Our 96 leadership was totally terrible. And so we said, they ruined the unit, and so we thought it was our job to take our unit and be successful in grades and athletics, military, all the stuff that you're here for, and we really did that. And so my challenge, I felt, was to pick the right people, to convince them to go in these key positions where I thought they were going to be most effective, and then to get my buddies to agree to swim in the same direction downstream. And it was by and large successful. We only had the cops called to our dorm one time for some nefarious activity on a weekend, but other than that, it was pretty good. And what I've used later on, 23, 24 years in the military, is that same principle. Is, these guys, I work with them, and we actually have like legal rank, and we have legal authority and all this stuff, but you can only get so far compelling people to do things at the edge of a gun or a knife, metaphorically. You've got to get them to agree to what, hold your, values and goals that you want to achieve. And that lesson that I learned here, my senior year, I feel like I keep going to that well, and trying to use that same methodology. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Major?
Yeah, the thing that I would say I learned and took forward here, so who here's in the third wing? One person, two person. So I was the first commander of the third wing when I was here in the Corps, and nobody really told, or the Bulls never told us that they were going to stand this thing up. So we all kind of like interviewed for Major Command, and they're like, hey, you guys got it. And Joe, yeah, now you're going to be the third Green Commander. Well, there's no third wing. Like, who's going to be in it? So there was like no background, like nothing was laid out. It was this big blank slate that we kind of like grouped a few squadrons together, and we were going to make it happen. But and the whole Corps didn't really realize what was happening either. So we tried to get people to apply for staff, and they were like, "What's a third wing?" So I had very little support, but I had a few good people that came along, and we were able to put a pretty good major unit together. But it kind of really gave an impression on me, the importance of developing the people underneath of you and having that mindset. Because we started out and I only had a few people, but I had to look because I was like, this cannot be, my staff cannot be this small going forward when the next commander comes in here the next year, right? So, and I need those people prepared. So you got to start thinking 2 or 3 lines down the road, thinking these are the people that I want to come into these positions. I want to provide for them today the opportunities that they are going to need to succeed and move into this. And that is just one of those key leadership lessons that you move going forward. And I took that forward in my first flight command, and every single person under my flight it was just a very varied flight, but they needed to be pushed and prodded and encouraged and given those opportunities. And it's not necessarily what they want, but you got to say, hey, look, Mr. Valdez, he's a 2nd lieutenant, he's in my flight, brand new engineer down at Eglin. He's going to be, in my mind, for all intents and purposes, he's going to be the next Chief of Staff of the Air Force. What does he need to get from this job, from this step, to make sure that he's ready to go? And that just changes your entire mentality. As these are not people that are worker bees. These are people with potential, and he's got weaknesses that you don't have, and you have strengths that he doesn't have, and and you're basically driving toward producing the best officer for the job. And I think that's just absolutely key.
What else?
So you mentioned you were deployed. Could you kind of talk about like lessons you learned or tips about like having an easy transition between being deployed and being home, or being
Easy transition.
Yeah, I think we all have probably. That sucks. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I don't know if I've ever really thought about that before, but I don't know. Gretchen?
So, for one, it's never an easy transition, and I think that's one of the reasons why you see so many issues with when people go out either multiple times or they go out long term and then they come back home. I know for a lot of us, guys, gals, whatever, one of the biggest things that we try to do when we come home is we try to take over control of everything that has happened, when you're out. So whether that's, if you've got a family or if it's just, within, relatives or anything else, the first thing you try to do is come and try and take back some semblance of control over stuff. But obviously when your family is without you either a number of times or they're without you for a number of months or whatever, when you come back and you try to make things right again, what you do is you most often end up disrupting all sorts of stuff. So I don't know if any of you are military brats or anything like that, but I'm sure that Vinny can attest to that. So one of the biggest things that we try to focus on, at least for our airmen, is just letting them know and understand, like, hey, here's some things that you need to watch out for. When you come back, don't try to fix everything because it's not really broken. It's just not either A, how you're used to it, or it's not the way that you would do it. And just because it's not either of those two doesn't mean that it's wrong. And then the other is, I think no matter what kind of deployed environment you're in, it's completely different from what it is here. I remember one of the biggest things that was always hard for me to get used to was traveling in a vehicle at normal speeds. Because for anyone that's been overseas, on a base, I think the base speed limits are like 15 clicks, so you're walking faster than the cars you're supposed to be driving. And so there's some adjustments and or anxiety that a lot of people will face because one, you've got faster cars, or so it seems, faster cars. In a lot of cases, you've got a whole lot more color. Like, the walls in here and the floor is about all the color that you're going to see in most of the deployed locations that you go to. I know there are some places where you can go where you'll see some green, but as you redeploy into Europe and other places, for some people it's their first time seeing, you know, shades of green for months, and it's weird to notice those things that you know, you're not used to seeing. So it's always a weird thing to transition back into the normal life.
You all, I mean, and that's a good question because you all will potentially see this, right? So the ONG is notorious for sending folks, and we live in the Houston area and up in on the west side where there's, you know, the energy corridor up on I-10, and most of the people that we interact with are you know, civilians, no military, right? And as you can imagine, and a lot of people in ONG, and they go down to, you know, Brazil for 6 months, and it's just mom and the kids. And that's pretty, you know, so there's a lot of career fields, nothing to do with the military, where you have the exact situation.
Yeah.
And you know, okay, you're not in a combat environment, but it's the same sort of stress. And it's funny what you mentioned. So I got accused of this the other day, coming from a 3-day trip, and it was a pretty restful trip. I had 36 hours off on day 2, so I didn't have to fly day 2, and I just spent like 6 hours PTing, you know, and it was great. And for me, my thing, so I have 3 kids and another, like a type A wife, and so we're all like, there's 5 super opinionated people in my house, myself included. And so when I go out, it's the opportunity for me to like fold my dirty clothes and have my shoes exactly the way I want it. Everything's neat, and I'm like super annoyingly to the rest of my family, like neat like that, or try to be. And so then you get home just after 3 days, and it's like my brain is just exploding with stress from the kids, and you know, what the way my wife is, and it's not as neurotic as I am in that way, and I just have to like choke it down, you know, because if I don't, then you know, because what happens is kids are getting to school, bills are being paid, everything's fine. Your version of fine is different, and that doesn't make it better or worse. I mean, it makes it worse usually because it's disruptive, and that's a challenge. And that's a challenge that we all face anytime we go away. That you come back, and if everything's cool, and it could be that, you know, the dual working family, and the kids are with a nanny or with grandparents or whatever that situation is, you come back, and that's always a challenge to come back into the situation. And it's stressful for me to do that. So what I try to do, although not successfully, is to bear that stress and just kind of let it go somewhere into the ground or something. And so I don't have to impart that stress on everybody else. And so it's like 2 ears, 1 mouth, so talk half as much as you listen, kind of thing. That's something you guys are gonna have to deal with, for sure.
Yeah, just one thing to kind of build on that. How many people here are married or going to be at some point or have plans in that direction? Yeah, your spouses and your potential future kids, they need you. Like, they need you to be there, and they need you to be engaged. And I tell you what, after deploying or flying 12 hours in the line, the last thing you want to do is the last thing I want to do, not really the last thing, the first thing I want to do is fall asleep on the couch. But my 4-year-old needs time to spend with me, and that time can't be split between 25 different other things, and that's something that I'm constantly fighting. And I would encourage you to, from day 1 of your marriage or day 1 of your motherhood or fatherhood, make time, be intentional about it, build into those people, spend the time, don't check out when you come home. If your career has to wait a couple of years because you didn't take the fastest track possible, trust me, it'll be worth it. At the end of the day, I'm going to retire or do whatever from the Air Force, and all this will vanish. My flight suit will hang up in the closet, and my wife and my kids are going to still be there, and that's when those chickens are going to come home to roost. So put effort, be intentional in that effort, because it's probably the most important job you have.
We can put your flight suit in the Corsair.
That's what I was going to ask. Maybe your boots or something.
No, you have it framed.
Exactly.
What else? Good question. What else?
I think, like he said, with that though, like the oil and gas thing too is a big thing. Like the excursions that people will go out on for that. I mean, people are gone for sometimes months. In fact, I've got quite a few friends who they leave, and I'm like, man, that guy's been gone for like 2 months, and he was supposed to be gone for a few weeks. What's going on? So that's something to keep in mind with whatever civilian, things that you get into. Is they're going to be just as taxing on you as the military might be, and you're going to run into the same thing. So wait, question.
I was wondering whether any of y'all have had fulfilling like interactions or relationships with people who have to be JAG officers, and whether any of y'all could talk about what that position brings to, I guess, any base that y'all have worked on or anything like that.
Scum of the
Jag,
earth.
right?
Yes, sir.
No.
No.
Yeah, that's one of these career fields that has a high degree of specialization, like medical, right? So there's this whole effort to recruit JAG as there is medical. They'll come in and be captains and majors, straight out the gate, depending on how much schooling and experience they have. So there's a lot of effort placed into recruiting the JAG Corps. My interaction with the JAG, is really only as a commander, and so as a commander, the JAG works in my interests, or advises me, or provides me legal advice in certain situations. And there's defense counsel as well as, and I don't know exactly what all the nomenclature is within the JAG Corps, but it's just like all of the law professions. You have, municipal defenders and, prosecutors and all this stuff, and it's very similar. So thankfully I haven't worked with defense counsel a whole lot, so that's, I haven't been really in any trouble, so to speak, but I have had to deal with the flavor that represents commanders in different situations where you have to adjudicate, like busted drug tests and these different things where legal stuff becomes required. It's like anything else, there's good ones and bad ones, and the ones I've dealt with are pretty good, offered up good advice, and their job is really to keep you out of trouble as a commander type. And I don't know what you experienced in that as well.
Yeah, so for me, I didn't have anything to do with the JAG probably until I became a squadron commander, and then now after having dealing with them in a good way, I feel like they're probably one of the most underrated, underutilized career fields that are out there, because most people, unfortunately, don't realize that they're there and what JAG can do in any facet that they have until A, they're in trouble, or B, they're looking at most likely having to adjudicate something for someone getting into trouble. And unfortunately, I mean, he's been in my office several times where I'm going through the commander and law book, and I'm like, I try to get educated on something, and ultimately I just call up our JAG, and I'm like, all right, so here's my most educated guess, and then most times he's like, no, you're stupid. This is what you should do. This is what you should have done, and this is how you should do it next time. At which point I was, bow down and say, yes, you're so smart. And then we do some paperwork back and forth. He cleans up my mess, and then everything's good. So obviously, from a satirical viewpoint on that, but I really do. I think they're definitely underutilized, and I think there are a lot of and all throughout the military. The more you understand the things that are going to get you in trouble, then probably the more trouble people would stay out of in the long run. That's what happened.
Are you thinking about doing something with the JAG, or?
Yeah, that's all. I was just kind of curious
Yeah.
what your views.
I don't have as much experience as these guys, but I'm always blown away by where I find JAGs. Like, you think that they're just going to be like at the command level, like adjudicating DUIs and whatever, and that's true. That's certainly a component. But like, there is nothing in the U.S. military that does not have a legal component to it. And I mean, like, they're everywhere. Like, we have a JAG that works counter drug up at state, and like he's over there like parsing the Title 32 and what we can and cannot do. When I was at U.S. CENTCOM, we had a J8 there, a JAG there, like weighing in on rules of engagements when we were calling shots. Like, I mean, it was everything in between. So I would encourage you to do so. It's an awesome career field, but don't like watch JAG the TV show and think that that's all you can do.
Or that everybody looks like.
Or there, yeah, like a lot of times, like some of the best JAGs, some of the most, the neatest JAG jobs ever have been staff jobs. Like they sit up there and they work with operations and like the J3 and the J5, the plans people, and come up with, they really get to weigh in on some neat things.
Yeah, legal use of force is a big deal, right? As you can imagine, and that's a good point. I didn't think about that. It's like what we do with MQ.
Yeah.
MQ9, MQ1 is blow things up and whatnot. But like, yeah, they're a critical component in every level of that, from the senior leadership perspective, strategically, to the engagement level when you're actually deploying, offensively lethal force. And so it's there's like this whole science within the military that I wasn't exposed to until I took this job on the combat side, and it's an entire science of the legality of using deadly force within the military, and it's very interesting. And JAG is obviously critically involved with that.
Thank you very much.
Kelsey?
I have two questions actually. So between the three of y'all, have y'all ever been stationed in Milton Hall, Lincoln Heath area? And then two, other than time off and money, how do you truly feel is a proper and appropriate way to motivate people, whether it's subordinates or like peers? Probably more directed than you with them, right? But then even if you want to interview you guys, what is your perspective on that?
Sweet. I like that question.
That is a good one. They call time. So that was part of what I taught. We had a leadership development course that we did last month at our drill at Ellington, and my subject was full spectrum leadership, and that's called transactional leadership. That's not a bad thing. Punishment and reward is transactional in nature, and so that is one component of leadership. You do have to hold people accountable, and that involves some method of consequential action on your part, right? And that could be punishment. We have various judicial and non-judicial punishments that we can use at our disposal as commanders. And then rewards, days off, extra pay. We have different categories of employees that we have that we can get extra pay for, and that's all good and important. There's also what we call this whole spectrum on the side of the spectrum that we call transformational, and that's where you roll into like lead by example and motivation, and where you really get into like what I was talking about, where you get into motivating people to agree, and some people will say that's the true definition of leadership, is convincing people to want to do what you tell them to do, right? And there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes in there, and they always say like, is that a third party validation? People say, what's the one most important thing in leadership? And I would say, well, there isn't one, right? They say, oh, it's integrity, it's this, it's that, and that's fine. But I mean, I could go off a list of 10 things, and they're all important. And depending on the situation, one may be more important than the other one. To include transactional, like it may be more important in this given situation for me to reward this person with something that they truly, truly value, or in order to uphold the integrity of the organization and the rules and these things, to punish this person. So there's just not much I can do for a person that pops positive on a drug test. And so there's a certain consequential action that I have to do for that. And that's important as long as it's one of the requirements or prohibitions that we have. Is that addressing your question? Yeah. So I mean, that is an important, and that's the thing, is it's not a bad way to lead. You don't want to be a one-trick pony, right? And so the point of that full spectrum model is where it just identifies these it's an archetypal model, and it says, depending on the situation, as a leader, you need to use lots of different tools, and the more widgets you have on your Swiss Army knife, the better you're going to adapt to different people and different situations. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Sweet. So I haven't been stationed at Millenhall. I attempted to get stationed there once or twice when I flew 135s. Did have quite a few friends that were stationed there. They loved it. The only thing, so Mildenhall is kind of like living over on the West Coast, up in Seattle / I lived in Spokane for a while, and so you're just gonna have overcast like all the time. It's kind of cool though, because once you punch through the overcast, if you're flying, then you know you get sunny days all the time. So that was great. What's the reason behind asking that question?
Getting married, and my fiance's gonna commission into the Air Force, and our first base, we're moving early September to Milton.
Milton
Oh,
Hall's
nice.
great. And I can tell you, remember in 2017, I was trying to get stationed
Yes.
there. There was like a full-time guard job where
Yeah.
they wanted somebody that had all this experience flying the planes I had flown, and you know, just for whatever reasons it didn't work out. But I had my wife convinced, the kids were gonna, it was gonna be great, you know. Europass on the train, go see Rome, the whole thing. I think it's a wonderful assignment. Yeah,
You've
I
won
think
the
it'd be great.
lottery. Congratulations.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
really good.
That's like a fantastic.
Far worse places.
It's a
to be going.
small-ish town, you know, but it's man, it's awesome.
Just go there with an open mind
yeah.
Yeah.
and just enjoy
And
it.
travel as much as
Travel,
you can. I
get
know
off of the base.
all of this is kind of slowing things down, but whatever you can do to travel, I know that was probably one of the biggest things that most people that I knew that were stationed out there, whether it was there, Ramstein, Stuttgart, Lake and Heath, was just get out and travel as much as you can. Because those are the times, you know, if you start having kids, like they're going to remember that stuff, and you know they're going to be, you know, that much more experienced in worldly type things. So that's cool. So yeah, I don't pay people to be happy at work. Neither does he. Otherwise, I'd be a lot more rich. No. One of the things that we talk about again in this leadership development course was just motivation. You know, how is it that you get people to do what you want them to do? And I take it a step further without having to ask them. You know, and the only way to do that is what he was talking to earlier. Is you got to train your replacements. You got to constantly develop people, whether that's professionally develop them, spiritually, emotionally, whatever that is, and in wherever you go. It doesn't have to be in the military. So if you're not contract, this doesn't matter. To me, I believe that there are a few things that are always going to help you, help others that are around you. Some of the big things there are connecting to people. And we talked about in this leadership development course, we did this for 4 days, and some of the trends that we saw were communication. So you communicating with others, whether that's through networking, whether that's just through peer connections, or whether that's just you branching out and going all over the place, doing things. One of the things that I started as a lieutenant, and I had no idea that this was some crazy thing that people didn't do, was I show up to Fairchild and I'm wearing a flight suit, and I didn't know what people at Fairchild did other than I knew that we flew 135s. And so as a little butter bar, I started walking around and just literally would show up in a building and I'm like, hey, what's going on? Hey, LT, what can we do for you? You lost? I'm like, no, I just want to come see what you guys are doing. And, what is it that you do here? And they're like, is this a joke? Or are you setting us up? And it was a curiosity because I was a late bloomer to ROTC. I didn't join until I was like a junior. And so I really didn't know a whole lot about the Air Force. And so I went around and just got to know people. And what I found is after a few months, it was kind of nice because I could go just about anywhere on the base. And, I'm sure everyone in the back room, oh, here comes that crazy lieutenant who talks to everybody. But it was cool because I could go places and would know people in just about kind of every facet. And then I just continued that throughout my career. And what I found is, especially now, one of the biggest things that we try to do is, in the ops world, most people are focused primarily on ops, especially, as we call them, our line flyers, because that's their job. We need them to be technically skilled to go out, tactically proficient at whatever it is, whether it's slinging, missiles or bombs or, whatever else we have going. And so, outside of that, we need to try and kind of build upon, hey, what are the other things, and just getting out and networking with people and showing not only what our people do to serve a greater cause, but then also getting to know other people and helping them understand what it is that they do. So that's what I try to do. No money, but I'll take money. Bonuses. Yeah.
We have about 5 minutes, gentlemen, so I might ask you quickly, and they're going to hang out for a few minutes afterwards if you guys have additional questions. But just because I'm being selfish, what dilemmas have you guys ever dealt with in your career that question your own ethics or morals? And how'd you handle it?
I think the most common one that I encounter that may be ubiquitous, I don't know, but as a leader, you're trying to, and here's the in brief that I give new commanders and new, senior NCOs and senior leaders within my organization, is that we're here to serve our constituency, right? And their job is to come to work and do a good job, and my job is to make sure they have the tools and the training they need to do their job. And we call that servant-based leadership. And so you really try hard to serve the people that are working for you, but you do have to reconcile that with your own goals and needs for your own career. And so there's a give and take, and you can only do so much in one direction, and it's to some greater or lesser degree. You can't give 100% of yourself to not looking at, just totally ignore your own career, because then you'll just more yourself out. You're not going to advance, and you're not going to get your degrees, your training, interview for jobs, all these kinds of things. And it's okay to say, hey, I might be good at this leadership job I want to do. Well, that takes effort, that takes time and energy that drains from your family and from the folks that work for you. So I think for me, it's not necessarily an ethical dilemma, but it's a dilemma that you face. Am I being too self-interested or self-concerned? And is that at the expense of these other things that I hold value to? Does that make sense?
So there's been a couple of times, I would say, like if you ever hit a hard spot in a leadership situation, because everyone's like, in leadership everything's great. Like everything is great, because all of those decisions that are black and white are very easily made. So if you ever run into those dilemmas, I know there was several when I was a flight commander where I was like, what should I do? How should I handle this person? How should I, deal with this situation? First thing I would say is seek advice, because you have some awesome people that are going to be over you. And then also seek to understand the situation, because 9 times out of 10, if you really dig into it, you're going to find that some of the more ethical, questionable situations are the result of not quite understanding the problem, or someone else within the construct not quite understanding the problem. So I would say, yeah, seek first to understand. And there are some times, though, that you are in a position of authority, and you're going to be called on to make hard decisions, and you got to make those hard decisions. I mean, there have been times especially in a flight environment, where we have 25,000 pages of regulations full of rules that we have to follow, that you have to make hard decisions and make sure that you're not going to. I've personally canceled missions before that on questionable calls, and you got to be willing to make those decisions.
Sir, you have 40 seconds.
Okay, cool. I'll make it an easy one. So we'll do a tactical situation. Kind of to go off of that. So flying Hercs once, I was supposed to go do a drop. So there's some Army guys that had been out of supplies for quite some time. We call them up on the way into the drop zone, and we get nothing. And we call them again, and then we start spinning circles, and we're way too low to be spinning circles. And so we climb up, call them one more time, and finally, as we're climbing out, we get better radio reception. They call, they're, oh yeah, sure, sorry, we got our Zulu time mixed up with our local time. Can we have you guys adjust the drop zone PI? So where they want us to drop it, they need us to change it. Technically, legally, I'm not allowed to do that, because in order to change a PI, you have to get it sent all the way up through different staffing levels at CENTCOM, whatever, other planning levels that were way above where we were. Because I was the tactics officer at the time, I was familiar with the area. I knew that we were good to go as far as any obstacles or anything else. I made the decision to go ahead and move the PI, reprogram the stuff into the box, dropped it a lot closer to where they were. They said what their issue was, their gator or whatever that they used to pick up all the supplies was broken. Whether that was true or not, either way, they got me to drop earlier. So the dilemma was I broke some pretty good regs and dropping on a different PI. I was like, hey, yeah, that was great. They said that was great. And everything was good until I showed up and my DO almost sent me home. Because he said, you were absolutely not within your right to do that because you don't have the authority to make that decision. And while I didn't have the authority to make that decision, to me it was important enough because I knew the situation of the guys that were on the ground. I knew how bad they needed the stuff, and I had the I'll call it the expertise or the education to know that if I do shift this, I have some sort of semblance of, hey, this is why we were okay to do that. So I was willing to say, all right, I'll stick this out there, but those are situations that you have to be very careful with, throughout your career, but one that I was happy to take. That was probably 3 minutes.
Pretty good. I don't want to hold you guys over, so if you got to go, by all means you can. But I want to thank gentlemen for being here today, and if you guys have questions,